Websites often use the IP address of a visitor that has visited them to do a reverse lookup to find out the location of the visitor. This is unreliable. It's inaccurate. I'm going to demonstrate why. But before that, a message. If you want to become a software developer, or you're already one and you want to become a better software developer, I'll soon be starting an online course for you. To be informed when the course is launched, please go to my website satyaish.net, scroll down to the bottom and join the mailing list so I can send you an email when I do. I've even got corporate training programs. So if you're a company that is interested in training its software developers, please scroll up to the middle of the page. From this list, select or search for any programs that might be of interest to you. Read the descriptions of the programs in the filtered list. Please read the terms and conditions and shoot me an email with your precise requirements and we'll take it from there. First, I'll try and find out my IP address, and to do that I'll just type in Google, what is my IP address? Usually it shows up at the top. This is my IP address. If this doesn't show up for you, you can also type who am I in Google. This tells me the same IP address, that's my IP address. This website also tells me some additional information about me. It tells me that my ISP or the company that provides me internet is Airtel Broadband, which is true. And if you scroll down to the bottom, it gives you a whole bunch of other technical information which I won't be getting into right now, which is not even relevant right now to the discussion. But it also tells me the IP address again in this field called remote_ADDR. There are some services which tell you, given an IP address, they tell you the location of the IP address. You can copy any IP address and just paste it in Google. And just click a bunch of links. Let me click the first link, db-ip.com. If I click this, it tells me about my specific IP address. The very beginning, you see a page header. It has wrong information. It says this address is located in Jammu, India, which is in the state of Jammu Kashmir. If I scroll down even further, it says the country is India, which is correct. The state or region is Jammu and Kashmir, and the city is Jammu. It implies that I'm sitting in Jammu, whereas I'm actually in Noida, which is like hundreds of miles away from Jammu. So this information is not accurate. This is another provider, geoiplookup.net. And this tells me that I am in Asia, in India, in Delhi, which is slightly better than the previous one, but it's still not completely accurate. This previous service that told me that I'm in Jammu actually has a programmatic interface or an API, api.db-ip.com/v2/free/ you can write self if you want your own information, or you can type in an IP address that you want to look up. I'll just type self and I get a JSON result of the same information that we saw earlier, which suggests that I'm in Jammu and Kashmir, in the city of Jammu. You can see it in raw form by clicking this. Needless to say, this is wrong information and can mislead someone. So if as a company you are relying on such a service to get information, say about your employees' location while they're on the field or while they're somewhere else, you could make wrong decisions using these services. Yet another service, I'm just showing you the contrast of how a different service will give you a different result for the same IP address. So yet another service is called ip-api.com. So if you type ip-api.com, / and then paste an IP address, it gives you the geolocation of that IP address. this one gives me slightly better information about my IP. It says the region is UP, Uttar Pradesh, and the city is Noida, which is even more accurate, but still not completely accurate. If I were to paste this GPS coordinates into Google Maps to see my location, it shows me a location that is not my real address. Actually, that's quite far away from where I am. But still, it's much better than the other services. So, why are there these differences in these services, and what can you do about it? One, what can you do about it? If you want the user's location, the best way is to ask the user's permission for his geolocation and get the geolocation using the geolocation API. Don't rely on an IP address. IP addresses change as you're traveling also, depending on the nearest cell tower that you're in. As to what an IP address is, do I have different IP addresses while I'm traveling? How is that? I heard that IP addresses are unique, they uniquely identify a device. I'm going to clear a few of these misconceptions in this video. An IP address is not something that uniquely identifies a computer. So people generally believe that an IP address identifies a computer or a device. That's false. An IP address does not uniquely identify a device. Two devices can have the exact same IP address at the same time, and I can show you that right now. There are two ways to show you that. You've already seen what my real IP address is. Here I'm showing you my phone, and I'm going to say the same thing in my phone. What is my IP address?
Public IP address is 223.190.3682.
There you are. My phone reports the exact same address that my desktop reports. This is one of the companies I worked for earlier called Global Logic. This is allocated an address range that starts from here and ends here. So this whole company, which has like at least 1,500 employees, if I'm correct. I don't know the exact number, but I can safely guess that in Delhi NCR itself, this company has more than 1,500 employees. But it has only 7 IP addresses allocated to this particular office of Global Logic in Haryana. Or I think it's not 7, it's 9 addresses. And maybe they have more addresses from different providers. Maybe they have more than Airtel as their broadband provider. Maybe they have many networks within them. Or maybe they have many other ASNs from Airtel itself, which is other Airtel sister companies providing them different networks. But regardless, the point I'm trying to make is, it's not uncommon for a large organization to have a few number of public IP addresses which they ration to the other internal IPs within their network. That means IP addresses do not uniquely identify a device. So then what's going on? What is an IP address then? What does it identify? There are certain bodies or institutions that support the internet. They help the internet work. One such body is called IANA, Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. One of the many things it does to support the internet is it assigns IP addresses. This is the entire gamut of possible IP addresses that can ever exist. For the Puritans that are highly pedantic, that's okay, I'm not talking about IPv6. Those who don't know what IPv6 is, never mind, shelve that off for a moment. The number of possible IP addresses in the world that there are is this, 256 multiplied 4 times with itself, which is roughly 4,300,000,000 or something. Now it turns out when the internet started, they never knew it was going to be that famous, so this was enough of IP addresses to allocate to all the computers in the world. So they thought this was a nice scheme, but as the internet grew, they realized this is a very small number, and there are more than 4,300,000,000 devices that need internet access. One of its job is to assign these IP addresses or ration them so that no two devices have a conflict. At the same time, they can all talk to each other on the internet. So an IP address is not something that identifies a device. It is only something that is assigned to a device during and for the purposes of its communication with other devices. I'll repeat that again. An IP address is a number assigned to a device. It is assigned to a device and only for the purpose of communicating with other devices and for the duration that it is communicating with these other devices. Which implies as soon as the communication is cut off, that computer does not need that IP address. It may still have it assigned to itself, but the IP address is of no use. So an IP address is really like an identity or a name. You have a name. At home, you may have a home name like Champu or Tikku or whatever. At school, you may have a different name, which is a serious sounding name like Gurunath or some serious sounding name. And then when you go somewhere else, you might have a different name. Your buddies might call you something else. So an IP address is like that. It's a name within a group, within a context, for the purposes of that group to be able to address you. As soon as you move out of the group and you come back home from school, once again you're called Champu. So an IP address is a name or some number assigned. Now the question is, who assigns it? IANA assigns it. How does it assign that address to me? Well, it doesn't know me personally, so it has to assign it to certain, just like any organization works. The big boss gives it to like 4 underlings under him. So the IANA gives addresses to 5 regional internet registries. These are organizations that just basically act as registers. They have a register which has entries of these IP addresses. Their job is further to disseminate these to local internet registries. And those people give it to either individuals or to other companies. The whole world is divided into 5 regions. For example, one of the regions that the world is divided into covers all of Asia Pacific. So the organization that manages that is called Asia Pacific National Information Center, or APNIC for short. If you give an IP address to IANA, it knows that this address belongs to one of these 5 regions. It can't tell you the exact city, but it can tell you the continent or Asia Pacific region. If you give it my IP address, it'll tell you this is something that I gave to APNIC. Who APNIC gave it further down to, I don't know. And then these 5 regions will give it to local internet registers. So there is an Indian NIC whose website is nic.in, which is a branch of APNIC itself, so I won't count it as a different agency, but a local internet registry would be a broadband player. So in my case, that would be Bharti Airtel, or other players in my country these are local internet registries. They get allotted a bunch of blocks. And each of these operators further allots IP addresses either to businesses, like we saw the case of Global Logic, or to other individuals like me. And obviously, since they have a limited quota of IP addresses, they have to keep shuffling these IP addresses. If someone is not using an IP, they have to give it to somebody else who is currently logged onto the internet, because not all people log onto the internet at the same time. You can look up several databases of this kind. The APNIC itself publishes one of these databases. In fact, all of these registries of the internet, right from IANA down to the broadband operator, has a database that they publish, and all of these services that I just mentioned get this one and this one and this one. They actually get their information from these databases. But the thing is that these databases change constantly, almost on an everyday basis. Why do they change? For any number of reasons. When you have something vast and huge, there are so many variables that can affect the change. For example, one of the cell towers has one of the transponders not working today. So whichever carrier was using that transponder, say Airtel was using one of those transponders, they have to reroute their traffic through a different transponder until this one goes back and is repaired. So the route changes, and they might have to reassign locations for specific IP addresses to other IP addresses, and so on. It could be someone went on a holiday, some operator went on a holiday that was a key guy, and I don't know, maybe he controlled one of the switches, and that router or switch is not working today. So they move to a backup router which has a different route table, and then so the internet registries have to update themselves to accommodate for this change. So there could be hundreds of reasons. There can be political reasons. Maybe after 3 years, India decides to rename 2 of its states. It takes a state and divides it into 2 states, like it did some years ago with Uttarakhand and Jharkhand or something. And then you have to rename and update your databases. So this operator obviously is using a very old database. So that's something I should send them a message about kindly. If I go to the Bharti Airtel Limited description on the website ipinfo.io, I see that Bharti was allotted 1.7 million IP addresses. That's the address of the provider. The source of this information is Apnic. The maintainer of this database is Apnic. You can actually verify that. You can copy and paste and look for this string in Google, and you will go to the Apnic database that describes this metadata. You can see this table describes this metadata that each provider, each allottee of Apnic is supposed to copy and paste on their whois entry. And then it allocated these addresses to these other companies. Oceanic Broadband Solution got, if I go to this link, it got a range of addresses. This is the range of addresses: 103, 106, 148.0 to 103, 106, 151, 255. That's a whole lot of IP addresses. So this is pretty large. This is a good large company. These are the IP addresses allotted, and you can click on any IP address to know more details about that. And you can see that this was allotted by Bharti Airtel to Ani Broadband Services. So this looks like another subcontractor broadband operator, this Oceanic Broadband Services. Of course, it has broadband in its name. So if I look up Global Logic, for instance, which is one of the companies I used to work for, there it is. You can see that this company was allotted these Class C addresses. Don't worry about what Class C is. Basically, it was allotted address number 125, 1958, 120 to 127. Just 7 or 9 addresses. So when a request comes in from Global Logic, you can be sure that it is from within these addresses. But you can't tell who exactly is making that request, because these 7 or 9 addresses have to be rationed across all users. And that is done by something called a network address translation layer that's in the router within each organization. When they install a router, when they install the networking software, that router translates an internal IP to one of these 9 IP addresses. So when you make a request from your computer for a website, if you have Wi-Fi on your laptop, what really happens is all those bytes and bits that you type go into the network interface card. There is a device driver there that knows how to relay or convert those digital binary bits and bytes into radio waves, because all communication of the internet travels on radio, and that radio wave travels to your router, and from your router it travels to the nearest ISP router, which is in my case would be Airtel. If you type tracert and any website, say I type my own website, it tells you how many hops were made from your machine to the destination machine. You can see over here that this is my local IP address, 192.168.1.1. From here, the radio waves made their way to this 122.176.127.70. If If you look this up on the internet, this would also be an Airtel machine, and you can check that again by this prefix. ABTS stands for Airtel Bharati Teleservices or something, the North Indian region, and this is a static IP in reverse. And you can see that the domain is airtelbroadband.in. Then it went to another Airtel website, which is again a router, then another Airtel router, until it changed its network to msn.net, which is a Microsoft domain. It went to a Microsoft router until it reached this destination, which is 52.173, which is the destination where my website is hosted, which is a bunch of Azure reverse proxies. So they're maintained by Microsoft. All of this happens over radio signal. And what's that? That's the cosmic radiation of the universe. And it all happens before you can blink an eye. I don't know about you, but when I think of all of this, I marvel at the mystery of that divine cosmic intelligence behind all of this.
And this is the line that ends the 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th puris. And that line is Nanak Bhagata Sadavagas Sonia Duk Pap Kanas. There's some really important and profound ideas that Guru Nanak anchors in these two lines that play out through the rest of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. So the first is to understand this phrase, Bhagata Sadavagas. The Bhagat is the lover, or the person who is devoted to the divine. So anyone who feels just a love towards the Creator, a love towards the play of creation and the mystic view of creation, it's just the state of love. And that person, Guru Nanak says, is Sada, always, and Vigas. And Vigas is a gorgeous nature analogy that means blooming. So if you've ever done any gardening or any farming, you'll notice that plants will bloom and then grow, then go dormant, but then they bloom again. And the blooming is the beginning of the next growth cycle and growth process. So in this analogy, Guru Nanak is saying, if you love the divine, there's no end to how you're going to bloom and grow.